Okay, what's next? No big surprise. You need to know how to turn. I was going to keep you in suspense, but I decided I should be up front. I'm going to talk about countersteering. You are going to hear that it is the only thing you really need to know about turning. You are going to hear that it works because of steering, not gyroscopes. I am going to try to prove these things to you. Please don't skip this section. A lot of people have died over this. We all know that in order to turn, we need to lean. If we stayed upright, centrifugal force would push us over like a kid tipping over on a tricycle. By leaning, we are giving gravity a chance to make us fall the other way. In a turn, we use our lean angle to keep these two forces perfectly balanced. This is physics, right? No one argues with this part. How do we do this? How do we keep our balance in a turn? By steering. Sound familiar? The bottom line is that balancing in a turn is exactly the same as balancing on a straightaway. On a straightaway, gravity pulls you down. In a turn, the combined effect of centrifugal force and gravity is like one bigger force pulling out at an angle. But the process of balancing is the same. If you start to fall to the left of this force, you steer left. If you start to fall to the right, you steer right. Balance is balance. This is what you've been doing since you were a kid. If you have any doubt, go out on the bicycle again and see for yourself. So what's the problem? The problem is that balancing is not the only thing you need to do. You need to make the bike go where you want it to go. I know some of this is pretty obvious. Here are two common scenarios. You are riding along on a straightaway, your mind drifts off to something else, you are having no problem keeping your balance, but then you wake up to realize that the road is turning and you aren't. Or, you are doing a great job balancing your way around a turn, enjoying the sensation of cornering a motorcycle, and then you realize that you are running wide into a ditch, or perhaps running wide towards an oncoming truck. These situations and these types of accidents happen all the time, seriously, all the time, with people who don't know how to turn. When they happen to you, and they will, you need to react instinctively, and the results will have to be immediate. Unfortunately, you'd be surprised how many people don't know what to do. You'd be surprised how many people spend what little time they have doing things that don't matter or things that make it worse. Let's fix this right now. You need to make the bike go where we want it to go. Do you know what determines where the bike is going to go? Lean angle. For a given speed, lean angle determines turn radius. Zero lean angle, you go straight. The greater your lean angle, the sharper you turn. Once again, basic physics. If you have the right lean angle going into a corner, it's almost magic. Everyone has felt this. It's a part of why we ride. But this doesn't happen all the time. It's exactly the same problem whether we are on a straight getting ready to head into a turn or in the middle of a turn that isn't going where you want it to. In either case, if you are not going where you want to go, it is your lean angle that you have to change. Don't try to put the cart before the horse. You need to change the lean angle first before you can turn. If you want to think of it a different way, it is your front tire contact patch that is going to push you around the corner. You have to put it out there where it can do its job. How? How do we get ourselves leaned into a turn? How do we change our lean angle? You already know the answer. We steer. More specifically, we countersteer. We've been using the handlebars to change our lean angle our whole life, and certainly for the last 15 minutes, and so don't stop now. By countersteering, we mean steering the wrong way first, away from the turn, to set up the lean that we want. We steer the front tire out from under us, rather than the usual steering it back underneath us. The bottom of the tires go away from the turn, your head leans into the turn. You saw this on the bicycle. Here it is again in slow motion. You steer away from the turn, the wheels go away from the turn, the bike banks like an airplane, your head leans into the turn, and then you have the lean that you need to make the turn. Humor me here. Please try to forget everything else you have ever heard on this subject, most especially gyroscopes, and let me talk this through. We'll come back to gyroscopes later. Countersteering is unbelievably effective. It works even when riders don't know they are doing it. This has been the source of confusion for a long time. People give credit to other things, and they shouldn't. In order to explain how well countersteering works, I'm going to explain it quantitatively. This will require some very elementary math. Seriously, perhaps the simplest math lesson ever. Stay with me. I know you can do it. My handlebars are about 2 feet across, so that's about 1 foot from the steering head to the grip. My front wheel is about 2 feet front to back, so that's about 1 foot from the axle to the front of the front tire. If I put a little bit of force on the handlebar, just like this, several ounces, the bars maybe move 1/4 of an inch. So if the end of the bar moves 1/4 of an inch, the front of the front tire will move 1/4 of an inch. Okay? So if I roll forward 1 foot, the front tire will move to the right by 1/4 of an inch. Big deal, you say. But if I move forward 4 feet, the wheel will go to the right by 1 inch. If I move forward 20 feet, the wheel will go to the right by 5 inches. Now we're not talking about the bike going to the right. The front tire contact patch goes to the right. The bike actually rotates along its longitudinal axis, so my head, for example, will move 5 inches to the left. This gives me about a 10-inch lean. This is what we have here on the side stand. So how long did that take? For sure, a lot less time than it took to explain it. At 30 miles per hour, that would be 44 feet per second. So that 20 feet would take slightly less than half a second. Okay, a 1/4 inch movement on the bars held for half a second gives me this lean angle, which is about 10 degrees. That's enough to take you around the turn on a winding road. It's more than you need for a lane change. In a parking lot at 5 miles per hour, a 2-inch movement on the bars held for 1/3 of a second will give you the same lean angle. That'll be enough to make sharp turns you need in a parking lot. If you want to turn sharper, hold it for longer. If you need to lean more quickly, turn the bars more. Need to double the lean angle, say 20 degrees, then move the handlebars a 1/2 inch, or hold the 1/4 inch for a full second. This is power steering at its finest. You do not need to bring any other forces into play to explain how well this works. This too you can practice on a bicycle. Once again, do it in an uncrowded parking lot. When you countersteer, you will be guiding the front tire contact patch. Watch how little handlebar movement it takes and watch the front tire move out from under you. You can see this. There is no gyroscopic action that is levering you from the axles. Your lean angle is caused by the wheels moving sideways. I read in a bicycle book years ago that one way to turn, say to the left, is merely to wait until the next time that you were falling to the left and then just don't correct for it. Or you could just let the wind blow you or push off from a parked car. That would work too. The point is you need to lean first before you turn. There are also people who say that countersteering isn't needed at slow speed, just turn the way you want to go. Seriously? What happened to centrifugal force? That only works for people who are falling and don't know it, and that's really not a joke. A famous motorcycle safety report was published in 1981 called the Hurt Report, named after the author. For riders who had accidents, its exact words were, "The ability to countersteer and swerve were essentially absent." Don't let this be you. In order to turn to avoid an object, the first reaction has to be to turn into the object. The report noted that many riders, reacting in panic, tried to steer away from the threat, thereby falling right into it. Exactly the opposite of what they needed to do. You need to wire your brain to countersteer. It has to be automatic. It'll save your life. As you can tell, I'm a bit binary on this subject. Many people say there are other ways to lean into a turn, and it doesn't really matter anyway. We should just let people do what works for them, not me. What they thought worked for them yesterday might not be good enough for what they need for tomorrow. As I said before, people have died over this. One common turning technique is called look left, lean left, turn left. Most people, but not everyone, who use this technique understand that the lean left part includes pushing on the left handlebar. But if not enough happens and your leaning is all tapped out, you need to know that it's more pushing on the bar that's needed, not more leaning. So why not push on the bar first? Some of the techniques that are proposed as alternatives to countersteering have to do with leaning your body, as you might if you were trying to ride a bicycle no-handed, sliding off the seat, or pushing with your legs. There is a law of physics I'd like to mention. You've heard of it. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. There are no exceptions to this. Don't let anyone try to talk you into a theory that ignores it. If we lean our upper body to the left, or slide our rear end to the left, we can only do this by pushing on the bike to the right. The bike has no choice but to lean to the right. It will then steer to the right, which of course is what you want. If you don't want it to lean to the right, you can steer to the right so that it stays upright. This won't take much, and many people will do this without even recognizing it. If you don't want to call this countersteering, that really doesn't matter, but you are getting the wheels to the right first, Then gravity will help you lean, only then can you turn. If you take track classes, which I highly recommend, and your instructor wants to use these techniques to turn, then by all means add these to your skill set. These are things you do before you turn to help you set up for the turn. They help you with smoothness and repeatability on a racetrack. But they are not good for missing the rock you didn't see or the car that just cut you off. Using your body is not a fast way to turn. This is. Okay, I need to pay lip service to gyroscopic action. Here goes. There are people who accept countersteering, but who attribute its effectiveness to gyroscopic force. You didn't have much gyroscopic force on the bicycle. A motorcycle wheel is heavier, but then so is the motorcycle. It might be helpful to note that gyroscopic action doesn't create force, it redirects it. It is your pressure on the handlebars that is being redirected by the gyroscope. You had better never put enough pressure on the bars to lean the bike. You know you're not doing this. Your pressure on the bars can be measured in ounces, maybe a few pounds in an extreme case. Also, gyroscopic force only lasts as long as it takes to turn the handlebars. You know, that 1/4 inch we talked about, or 1/2 inch. Not the time that you were actually holding them there. This is pretty brief, to say the least. There are some very good articles in Wikipedia right now about bicycle and motorcycle dynamics that cover the importance of countersteering and the role of gyroscopic action in leaning a motorcycle. These are very technical. One article concluded that gyroscopic action accounts for only 12% of the force that leans a motorcycle, and that sideways movement of the tire accounts for the rest. If you think about it, that should sound about right. You know you were pushing something, but you are not moving the whole weight of the bike. These authors understand the fields of dynamics and control theory. I'm not going to argue with them. If you want to, then be my guest, but you might brush up on your math and physics first. I cannot stress highly enough that countersteering is what works on the street. It works at all speeds, all the time. Understanding this is critically important, and you won't learn it without some effort. Practice on the bicycle, and then practice on a motorcycle. Just don't look at the bars. Trust me, when you push, they move. At normal motorcycle speeds, very little pressure and very little movement of the bars is needed. But when more is needed, make sure that's what you give it. Perhaps for years you've attributed your leaning with gyroscopic action, or with leaning your body. If so, you need to unlearn this. Seriously, unlearn it. While you ride, think about your front tire contact patch until you are sick of it. And if you are already sick of it, then that's too bad, because you probably need to think about it some more. I want to make the same point that I made in the last section. The buck stops with you. You balance the bike. You control the lean angle. You do this by steering. Steering is the one thing you can do that has immediate results. If you don't have much time, don't waste any of it by doing anything else first. Your first reaction needs to be to countersteer.